If you're watching this video, it probably means that you have some level of interest in attending church. Now, every Christian has several biblical responsibilities that they should be following whenever they attend church. Do you know what they are? And if so, how good of a job are you doing? Hello and welcome back to Venture Together. My name is Josh. Super glad that you're here. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about three jobs that every believer should be doing each and every time they attend church. But before we dig into that, if you wouldn't mind helping out the channel and helping out the video, be sure to hit that like button. Or if you're listening on a podcast platform and you're able to leave a rating or a review, all of that would be extremely helpful. So if you would like to take the time to do that, it would be much appreciated. Now, let's dig into the subject today. Three jobs for every Christian, every churchgoer. What are some things that we should be doing? Let's just say it this way. There's a lot of reasons why people could attend church. But biblically, what are some things that we should be doing as Christians each and every time we go? Well, to answer that, we're going to look at a couple of verses and we're going to tear apart a few words and see exactly what it is that we should be doing. On the other side of that, we're also going to talk about some reasons, potential reasons why that might not be happening, and maybe why. Obviously, we'll talk about why it should be, but I don't think it's something that happens each and every time every Christian goes to church. So, question is, well, why not? And so we've got some potential reasons why that would be the case. So let's look at the passage here. We're going to pull up these verses. It's Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. This verse 25 is often referred to when trying to emphasize the importance of attending church, and we'll highlight that a little bit later. But the key here that we're going to look at are three jobs, three things that each Christian, each believer should be doing every time they attend church. So let's read the verses and then we'll highlight these three things. Verse 24 says, "And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." All right, it's pretty simple here, right? Three things that we should be doing. The first one you see here in verse 24, let us consider one another. What does it mean to consider one another? It carries the idea of inspecting one another. You say, wait, hold up. You mean that whenever I go to church, I'm supposed to be analyzing my fellow Christians? I should be inspecting them? Yeah, we should. You ought to be analyzing them, inspecting them, critiquing them on their, so to speak, spiritual health. Now, let's be very careful here. Make sure we don't imply anything. This isn't meaning to, belittle them. It doesn't mean to judge them in the way of, the improper type of judgment where we would be, thinking of ourselves better than they, or I can't believe they would do that, or they would think that, or say that, or behave that way. That's not the type of judging we're talking about, critiquing that we're talking about. This idea is, to really, it's just the idea of analyzing, to really kind of take some time and evaluate other believers around you. And notice too, it's very obvious in the verse. If I just cut it right there, it kind of could be left open to interpretation. But the verse, when you read it all together, it makes it very clear that this first thing that we should be doing, considering one another, is linked to the second thing that we should be doing. Let us consider one another to something, right? To what? Provoke unto love and to good works. So the purpose and the intent of analyzing one another's spiritual well-being is so that we can provoke one another, which is our second thing here, that we can provoke one another towards something. That we can, and the word provoke, it means to incite or to, strongly encourage someone to do something. So we need to be considering one another, evaluating one another in order to provoke each other toward two things, toward love and to good works. This word love is the The Greek word agape love, it's unconditional love, it's Christ-like love. And so we should be considering one another in order that we would admonish one another, encourage each other strongly toward Christ-like love. And then the second thing is that we would encourage each other toward good works, righteous behavior, righteous living, Christ-like living, right? So what is it that we should be doing in verse 24? Evaluate one another and encourage each other to be more like Jesus, right? That's something that we should be doing, and that makes pretty good sense. It sounds good, right? I think that's obvious. And then we get to verse 25, where we see the third thing that we should be doing. It says, "Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but what?" It says, "But exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." So this word exhorting is the Greek word that has the meaning of, to come alongside somebody. I think we use it a lot of times in the sense of like you're going to come alongside and encourage someone, or someone's going through a hard time. You're going to go through that hard time with them. You're going to support them. It's not like we would take the considering and the evaluating of one another and then say, hey, you need to be more like Jesus. You need to love more. You need to be, behaving better, right? To do good works. Go ahead and get on that, and we'll see how you're doing next week. That's not the idea, right? These three things, we need to evaluate one another and to encourage each other strongly to be more like Jesus, but then we need to help each other do that. So it's all when we get to church, we can evaluate, we can encourage and prod and really just strongly admonish one another to be more like Christ. But we need to support each other in that process. So that's the three jobs, right? And we didn't take very much time to talk about this, right? It's just the three things that every Christian should be doing when they go to church, is to encourage one another and, well, let's back up, to consider one another, evaluate how each other are doing, how everyone's doing around you. And by the way, we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but that also includes you, that other people would be analyzing you in this process. So that's critical. But that's the first thing, to consider one another, to provoke one another, to strongly encourage other people, to incite others around you to love like Jesus loves, and to behave and act and talk and think and do like Jesus does, right? To provoke one another to good works, as verse 24 says, and then to encourage each other, to exhort one another, to come alongside one another, and make sure that as fellow believers are in this journey, that we're not just sending them off on a journey on their own, that we are going through it with them, and we're encouraging them and supporting them, coming alongside them, and helping them along the way. That's the three jobs, right? Pretty simple. So let's spend the rest of the time talking about the other thing, and that is, why does this not happen? Why is it that these things, I mean, you read those two verses, we sit down and we just kind of go word for word. Let's just, get some key definitions here, make sure we understand this passage. Why is it that this doesn't happen more? And I think there's a few reasons, potential reasons for that. Now, I think there's probably more than these, so it's not just black and white, but I think these will be some of the highlights, and maybe be relevant to you if maybe you say, you know what, I attend church, but I don't remember the last time I talked with somebody about how they're doing spiritually. I mean, we have small talk and, we catch up with how life is and how work's going, but I don't remember asking them what they did in their devotions this week. Or I don't remember saying, what have you been learning lately? And what has God been teaching you lately? How can I be praying for you? If that's you, and maybe you're saying, I'm not being as intentional as I should be about investing in others, let's just break down a little bit of why that might not be happening. And I think it's important to understand why so that we can combat it. And then the last thing we'll look at is, how do we do this, right? What are some things that we need to take away from it? So here's what I would say about that. Here's the where the rubber meets the road for all of us, because none of us are perfect in this. We all have room for improvement in this. So here's how we just have to look at it. If we are not investing in others as we should, if we are not, if we're not analyzing one another, considering one another, if we're not provoking one another towards love and good works, and we're not coming alongside one another to do that, we're not supporting each other. If that's not happening as it should, that means that we are not focusing on others as much as we should, which then the all opposite is true. That means that we're focusing too much on ourselves. If we're not focusing on others, their focus is going somewhere. Where is it going? If it's not on others, it's on ourselves. Now, that may be intentional, it may not be, and I would probably say I think the majority of the time it's probably not intentional. But it's maybe just lack of attention altogether that maybe we're just not aware of what's going on, we're not noticing it, and so maybe some of these things will help if we're just honest with ourselves and we do a little introspection, might be able to figure out, okay, does any of this apply to me? It may or may not. But here's some things that I think could be some of the more, towards the top of the list of reasons. One thing is maybe there be people that attend church that just simply do not have the servant's heart that they should. They're there and they're willing to have conversation, but they're not willing to go out of their way to do these things. And this one is kind of potentially linked to. I mean, they're all kind of intertwined, but I think that could be one of the reasons, right? I'm willing to go to church, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to sing, but I'm not willing to, really invest heavily into the people or the people around me. That's the pastor's job, that's the staff's job, that's the Sunday school teacher's job. That's not my job, That might be some of the mindset that and where does that come back to? It comes back to, I think, this idea of just a servant's mindset, that you're at church in order to serve others. If you don't have that mindset, you're not going to do it. So, that could be one potential reason. Now, linked with that, potentially, is that there might be a consumer mindset that I think a lot of people potentially have in church. They go to church in order to be fed, they go to church in order to be served. That they go to Sunday school and they sit at a table and there's a Sunday school teacher. Maybe it's a church that has a variety of Sunday school classes, and you can kind of just pick the one that either has the focus that you enjoy, or maybe it's broken up on ages or stage of life. Maybe it's a couples class, maybe it's a families class, and so everyone in there is someone that's they're married, they have kids at home, so maybe it's hand tailored to you, and you go there in order to be fed. Or maybe it's you just say, you know what, I go to church in order to enjoy the music, to be encouraged by the singing, to sit down and just enjoy the message and be challenged by that. And then when the service is over, then I go home. And then maybe I'm not back Sunday night. Maybe I don't go to the midweek service, and maybe I'm just there Sunday morning to Sunday morning, right? I don't know what the case may be from person to person, but if it's I think anything like what you typically see in churches, at least in my world in America, Sunday morning is your most heavily attended. Sunday night drops off from that, and Wednesday night drops off for your midweek, drops off even more. And sadly, that's kind of typical. And it shouldn't be that way, just to be honest. It shouldn't. They all should be full. But why is it? Why is it that people come Sunday morning and less Sunday night and less midweek? I think it might be just they feel like they've had enough from Sunday morning. They don't feel like they need more. And this comes back to this consumer mindset that they are there in order to be served, they are there in order to be fed. And if that might relate to you, that's going to distract you from investing in other people, because now that's you serving, right? Goes back to the first thing, the servant's mindset. That implies that you should be serving, and you can't just be there to be fed and then also serve, right? If you're just there to be fed and to consume and absorb, biblical information, biblical knowledge, and to consume encouragement and love and compassion from others, you're not going to invest in other people. If that's the reason you're there, you're not going to do it. Now, this third one is going to completely shift gears. It's not so much about the lack of a servant's heart or the consumer mindset. It might be a situation where you potentially, if this would apply to you, that your heart's right. You want to be a blessing. You want to be an encouragement. You want to help others around you grow in their walk with Jesus. You want to help them mature spiritually. But this one key thing might keep you from speaking up, and that is fear of conflict. And if that applies to you, I think it probably applies to a lot of people. I think in the typical American culture, and I say American culture, uh, I think, does anybody like to be told that they're doing something wrong? I don't think so. I think everybody is going to uh, tend toward, getting a little offended kind of easily if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, be careful. Hey, watch out. Hey, I saw something or I noticed something and I don't know if it's legitimate or not, but I just wanted to say something just in case it might be a help and I'll just leave it at that." If someone were to approach you in that way and you come away offended from that, that's the reason why we're fearful, because they would say, "You know what? I don't wouldn't want anyone to talk to me like that. I wouldn't want someone to confront me." You mean that you've actually taken time and, observed me and looked through what you think and what you perceive is going on in my heart, and you have the guts to approach me about that? Who do you think you are? Right? That kind of mentality. That kind of response is what we're scared of. And I mean, yeah, it scares me too, just to be honest. I mean, I think that fear of conflict has the potential to keep us from speaking up. So, here's the reality though. That's still focusing on yourself, right? You're scared of the reaction. You're scared of the potential negative response, right? You might be saying, if I speak up, will it hurt our relationship? Could. It might not. I hope it doesn't, but it could, right? You say, well, what will they think? What will they say back to me? Will they be offended? Will they be hurt? I don't know. I'm not sure how people would respond. You might just say, I don't want to offend them. I don't want to overstep my bounds. I don't want to, get in their life too much and offend them. And on a human standpoint, I kind of see where you're coming from, but that's still focusing on yourself, because you're saying, I would rather not come to grips with a confrontational situation that, if the intention is that it would be a help to this other individual, that it'd be a blessing to them, that it would be something that would encourage them, that would lift them up, that would help them grow closer to Jesus and be more like him. That's the goal, right? Go back to the verse. What are the things we should be doing? Considering one another, provoking one another, not to just be like the model Christian, but to be like Jesus, right? Just not this perceived idea of what Christianity is, but to our role model, Jesus himself, to be like him. That's a very good thing. And we as Christians ought to be open to that, right? And if obviously we have blind spots. If someone comes up and addresses something like that with us, we ought to appreciate it. Now, is it going to feel good? No, absolutely not. We don't like it. But it's kind of that idea of admonishment and correction, like from a parent to a child. It's not pleasant, right? Scriptures here in Hebrews talk about it. It's not pleasant, but we should appreciate it and understand why it's happening, because it's for our benefit. So, um, but I think there's been enough believers that have tried to do this, and the response has been a negative response. I'm just, hypothetically, a how dare you response, who do you think you are kind of response. And then it creates a rift between them. And now they're saying, well, if that's how people are going to respond, I'm not going to do it. Right. And I think that might be a lot of what's gone on. But the reality is, if we want to serve, sometimes we got to face hard situations, right? If we want to do this, if we want to be faithful to do what Christ has asked us to do, to consider one another and provoke one another to love and good works, and to come alongside one another and encourage each other in that process, if that's what we want to do, there's going to be hard times. There's going to be situations that are not pleasant and conversations that have to be had that are not going to be fun, but ultimately, in the long term, it ought to help the other individual grow and it ought to strengthen that bond between you and the other person. Now, let's look at some keys to success. How exactly do we do this? Well, here's a few quick thoughts on the way out. All right. Number one, if you want to do this, first of all, the 101, you got to be there. You got to be at church. You can't do this from home, right? Verse 25 talks about it. Let's pull it back up here. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is. There were believers that were not attending church. They were treating it flippantly. They were not taking it seriously. And the author of Hebrews, whoever he may be, is is just saying here, don't do that. Don't forsake this time. It's important. It's crucial. It's immensely valuable. And you need to be there in order to accomplish these things. If you're not there, you can't do it, right? So you got to be there. So that's the easy thing to highlight here. You got to be at church, right? You can't do this from home. You can't do this over live stream. You can't even realistically, I mean, I guess you could do it in like small groups, but the context here is the church. The context is the gathering of believers. And if we're not at church, these things cannot happen. So you got to be there. But then there's two other things here. You have to serve with love and humility. And I think these two things I'm taking from biblical principles and common sense, right? So one thing is this: if we're going to serve people in this way, we're going to, analyze each other. We're going to encourage each other strongly towards love and good works, and we're going to come alongside them. You can't do that with pride and arrogance. You can't do that while being insensitive, right? So there's an element that we need to do these things. We need to have these hard conversations. We need to be talking to people and talking to other brothers and sisters in Christ and encouraging them to be more like Jesus. Well, if we're going to do that and we're going to do it effectively, we cannot do that with pride in our heart. We cannot do that in a self-conceited way. We can't do that in an unloving way, because how's the other person going to respond? They're going to see that. They're going to know exactly where you're coming from, and they're going to say, who do you think you are? Right? You do this. You're such a hypocrite. You're telling me to do these things, but you don't even do them yourself, right? So, and are we all sinners? Yes, but just think of the tone, right? Think of the difference that if you approach it from that side versus you come from the approach of, hey, I love you. I've been praying for you this week, and I just wanted to let you know something. And I don't know if it's legitimate or not. I don't know if it's real or not, but I care enough to say something, and I just want to help you out if I can. If you approach it that way, from a humble spirit, from a loving spirit, it's going to be much better received, right? So, and honestly, what attributes do we see in Jesus that we should be modeling ourselves after? Not pride, not arrogance, not self-conceit, humility, servant's heart, unconditional love. That's how we should be behaving at all times, and that's exactly what we should carry over into this, right? We need to serve with love and humility. But here's the other side of it too. We need to allow others to serve us with love and humility. The point is here, we need to make sure that we can be addressed in the same way that we should be encouraging others. So whenever someone approaches us and confronts us with something that they see, we need to make sure that we're responding with humility and love towards them and understand that, you know what, they don't have all the information. They may be entirely wrong, but they loved us enough. They loved me enough to say something. They loved me enough and they cared enough to put themselves out of their comfort zone and into a situation where it's just kind of at, however I want to respond with that, right? They're putting themselves out there, but they cared enough to do it because they love me and they want what's best for me. You know what? I appreciate that. And if someone were to, say something like that, I hope that my response would be, thank you so much for taking the time to bring this to light. I'm really going to consider that. Would you pray for me about that? And so we can help me get this figured out, right? That's how we ought to be responding. And that's how I would hope someone would respond if I approach them about something. Would everybody do that? Probably not. But I think that's how it should be. right? So if we're going to consider one another and provoke one another and exhort one another as scriptures encourage us to, we need to do that with love and humility, but we also have to allow others to do that toward us with love and humility because none of us are perfect. We all have work to do, right? So we all have room for growth. And it may take someone calling out a blind spot in our life in order to grow more and to become more like Christ. And if that's what it takes, then I hope someone would step up and tell me that, right? And I think we all would appreciate that. Um, what's going to stand in the way of that's our pride. If we're not willing to allow someone to confront us, if we're not willing to grapple with the fact that I might be wrong and I might need someone to help me along this process, if you can't do that, you're probably not going to respond well. So we need to have love and humility on both sides. It's a two-way street. So go to church not only to consume, not just to just fill a pew and do it out of religion, or I say religion out of just like a tradition. It's just something that we do every Sunday. Don't go for that. Go to serve. Go to be a blessing. Go to help each other grow, and go to allow other people to help you grow, to become more like Christ. That's what we ought to be doing. And I don't think it's in here. Let's see here. Yeah, it is. Yeah, end of verse 25. Here's a big reason why, and we're not going to expound on this right now. But it says here at the end of the verse, do this, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. What day is that talking about? That's talking about the day that we see Jesus, right? That's talking about the day that we give an account for how we've lived for Christ at the judgment seat. The Each second that we are here is a second closer to that day. And the more that things happen in this world, the more that the wickedness is spreading, the more that evil things happen, the more that the effects of the curse on this world happen. Each day, as time goes on, we know that we're getting closer to that day. And the closer we get to it, the more we ought to be helping each other out. So when we go to church, it shouldn't just be out of convenience. It shouldn't just be because it's what we do. We ought to be going in order to serve one another, to be an encouragement and a blessing to one another, to be a help to one another, to become more like Christ. And that's what we ought to be doing. So I'll leave you with the question that I did at the beginning. How good of a job are you doing at that? If you're doing great, keep it up. If you got some work to do, maybe I hit on something that maybe resonates with you, maybe I didn't. If I didn't and you say, you know what, I'm not doing this as much as I should, but I need to maybe just get some further help with that, on just maybe figuring out what is it that's going on, how can I do a better job of this, whatever it is. If it's something that obviously, the first and foremost, go talk with your pastor if you need some advice on that. Go talk to the people that know you. But feel free to message me, reach out to me. I'd be happy to try to help you figure out what's how we can do a better job of this and do these things to be a blessing and encouragement to you and whoever else might be watching. So let's do that. Let's help each other grow to be more like Jesus each and every time we go to church. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Or if you're listening on a podcast platform, thank you so much for doing that as well. Again, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. That'd be a huge help. And if you'd like to subscribe so that you don't miss any of the other episodes that are coming out in season 2, by all means do that. Would love for you to be able to come back and see what other great videos we have coming your way. There should be a video up here if you'd like to check that out on your way out the door, so to speak, and I'll catch you next time.